Aaliyah Brooks was the top of her class, until one accusation shattered everything. Suspended mid-exam for cheating, she never committed, and framed by the very system meant to protect her. Hidden footage, secret files, a principal with a pattern. What started as one girl's fight turned into a national movement. Because when they tried to silence Aaliyah, they forgot she had the truth. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. She had perfect grades, a scholarship on the line, and dreams bigger than her small town. But she was born with two strikes. She was smart and black. Aaliyah Brooks had never asked for attention. Not when she stood at the front of her AP English class reciting Baldwin. Not when she crossed the stage for the Honor Society's monthly spotlight. And certainly not when her face appeared on the school's front page newsletter after she crushed the SATs with a 1530. She didn't want the spotlight. She just wanted out of Oak Ridge, Georgia. Out of the pretty, polite racism hidden behind garden hedges and PTA bake sales. Out of the suffocating small-town ceilings where a black girl could rise, but only so far. Oak Ridge looked like a postcard, tree-lined streets, brick school buildings, Sunday church bells that echoed down neat sidewalks. But behind that picture-perfect image lay a different truth. It was the kind of town where the local diner still had colored scratched into the back of one of its vintage booths, faded under layers of polish, but never truly gone. The kind of town where black kids were told to act right before field trips, while white kids were given candy to behave. The kind of town where black excellence was tolerated, until it made someone uncomfortable. Aaliyah, 17, understood this. She lived with her mother, Kendra, in a weathered duplex on the east side, the wrong side, according to some. Her father had left before she was 2, and Kendra worked double shifts at the county hospital to keep the lights on and her daughter's dreams alive. Aaliyah learned early to handle things herself. Before school, she packed lunches for both of them. After school, she tutored local middle school kids and ran errands for the elderly woman across the street. She was the kind of student teachers bragged about, yet the kind the system quietly tested, again and again. Every evening, after helping her mom fold laundry or review her nursing notes, Aaliyah retreated to her desk in their shared living room, surrounded by hand-me-down textbooks and sticky notes. Her dream? Columbia University. She had it all mapped out: political science, then law school, then civil rights law. She didn't want to just escape the system. She wanted to dismantle it. But dreams like that don't go unnoticed in Oak Ridge High. Principal Darren Holt watched students like Aaliyah with a kind of smiling suspicion. He was sharp-dressed, spoke at conferences, quoted Martin Luther King Jr. when the cameras were rolling. But his actions whispered something else. He used words like attitude when describing outspoken black students. He pushed for zero-tolerance policies. And somehow those always landed hardest on kids with darker skin. No one could ever prove he was targeting them. That was the brilliance of Holt. He played the rules like a violin, pretending they were blind. And Aaliyah? She'd already seen 3 of her friends suspended for things white students got detentions for. She'd seen how Holt called black girls aggressive when they defended themselves, and how he let a white boy plagiarize an entire paper without consequence. Aaliyah kept her head down. She followed the rules. But even she knew Holt was watching. The week of the AP US History exam, tension followed her like a shadow. Everything was riding on that test. Aaliyah's final scholarship review depended on it. Scoring high could mean the difference between full tuition or nothing at all. She spent hours reviewing flashcards, timing essays, watching old documentaries her teacher recommended. But something felt off. In the hallway that Monday, Holt stopped her for the first time in months. His smile was thin.
"You ready for the big test?" he asked, eyes unblinking.
"Yes, sir," she replied, polite but guarded. "Good. I'd hate for someone with your potential to throw it all away." She walked away with that sentence echoing in her head. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Throw it all away. Like it wasn't hers to begin with. By Wednesday night, the weight was almost unbearable. Her mother noticed her silence over dinner and reached across the table. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you already made me proud," Kendra said softly. "They can't take that from you." Aaliyah nodded, but her stomach was tight. Something didn't feel right. That night, she stayed up late reviewing one last time. Around 11:30 p.m., she received an unexpected DM on her private Instagram. No profile picture, no followers. Just one sentence. "He's going to make an example out of you." She froze, heart thudding. She stared at the message. She refreshed the page. The account was already deleted. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Aaliyah moved like a ghost. Her mother tried to talk to her, but Aaliyah kept insisting everything was fine. Inside, she felt like something was building, like she was walking into a trap. At school, the hallways were buzzing. Students joked about the test, exchanged last-minute notes. Aaliyah kept her eyes down, but she could feel them. Eyes, watching. As she entered the testing room, her hands trembled slightly. She found her seat, neatly labeled Brooks A. A sheet of lined paper, 2 pencils, and a calculator were placed in front of her. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the AC unit. The teacher read the instructions, handed out the booklets. Aaliyah closed her eyes for a second, breathed deeply, and opened the test. The clock started. 20 minutes in, everything felt familiar. Questions she'd practiced, essays she'd rehearsed. She found her rhythm, her breath even, her thoughts sharp. But halfway through the first essay, a sudden pause filled the room. The door opened. Principal Holt walked in, calm but purposeful. Without a word, he scanned the room, eyes locking on Aaliyah. He walked over slowly, leaning down just enough for the entire class to hear. "Miss Brooks," he said, voice smooth as silk. "Step outside." The entire class turned. Aaliyah blinked, confused. "I'm in the middle of the test," she said quietly. "I said now." Students exchanged glances. No one said a word. The teacher looked startled, but didn't intervene. Aaliyah stood, confused, as Holt reached beneath her desk and held up a folded slip of paper. "Care to explain this?" he asked. Aaliyah stared. She'd never seen it before. I didn't. "We'll discuss this privately," he interrupted. She followed him out of the room, every step echoing in her ears. What Aaliyah didn't know was that someone in the hallway had their phone out, recording every second of what happened next. And what no one knew yet was who had put that note under her desk before the test started. As she sat in the principal's office, waiting to be expelled, another anonymous message appeared on her phone. "Check the security camera. It wasn't you they were watching." One moment she was writing an essay. The next, she was being dragged out for cheating. But no one saw her look up. The room was dead silent, the way only a high-stakes test day could make it. You could hear the scribble of pencils against paper and the occasional sigh of anxiety escaping from the back row. The smell of printer ink still lingered in the air, mingled with the faint chemical scent of floor polish, a sign that the janitors had done their late-night sweep. Aaliyah sat in the second row, 4th seat from the left, directly beneath the curved lens of a small surveillance camera mounted in the corner. It was one of those modern, nearly invisible types, nothing more than a black half-dome affixed to the ceiling. Few students noticed it anymore. Fewer still understood that it had been added only last month, after a minor vandalism incident in the chemistry lab. But Aaliyah noticed. She noticed everything. She glanced up just once before the test began, locking eyes with no one, just quietly acknowledging the lens. Then she pulled her sleeves up to the elbows, lined up her number 2 pencils, and began her essay. The prompt asked her to evaluate the socio-political consequences of Reconstruction. She didn't hesitate. The words came to her like second nature. For the first 30 minutes, Aaliyah was a machine. Paragraphs flowed. Her handwriting was sharp, steady. Her brain clicked into gear like it always did. Under pressure. She had trained for this moment, sacrificed sleep, and Saturdays for them. And despite the message from the night before, despite the lingering dread she couldn't explain, she told herself, "Focus. Just focus." Then the door opened. Principal Holt entered with the eerie calm of someone walking into a boardroom, not a classroom. His black leather shoes echoed faintly across the tile as he moved with deliberate, steady steps. The teacher at the front, Mrs. Glenn, looked up mid-proctoring, clearly confused but too intimidated to interrupt. Aaliyah didn't look up. She was deep into the second body paragraph of her essay, quoting Du Bois with ease. Holt stopped behind her. The pause in his movement was so sharp that it broke the flow of time in the room. Several students raised their heads, eyes darting between Aaliyah and the man looming behind her. Then he spoke. Calm, firm, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Miss Brooks, would you please come with me?" Aaliyah froze, pencil still in hand. Her mind scrambled to interpret the words. She slowly turned, confusion painting her face. "Sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've had a report of academic dishonesty," he said, holding up a folded sheet of paper between 2 fingers. "Found under your desk. Gasps rippled through the classroom. Aaliyah stared at the note. She didn't recognize the paper. Hadn't seen anyone approach her desk. She hadn't even left her seat. "I didn't," she began. But Holt raised a hand. "We'll talk outside." The silence was suffocating. Aaliyah stood slowly, her palms damp. She walked past the rows of wide-eyed students, her sneakers squeaking on the waxed floor. She couldn't breathe. Her thoughts were crashing into one another. As they stepped into the hallway, Holt didn't offer her a seat. He held the note out to her again. "Care to explain?" he asked, eyebrows raised in feigned curiosity. Aaliyah reached for the paper. It was a list of answers, question numbers, and corresponding letter choices, scribbled in a different handwriting from hers. She'd never seen it before. "This wasn't mine," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "I don't cheat." "Funny," Holt said, slipping the paper into a folder. "Because it was under your desk, and we take integrity very seriously at Oak Ridge." She stood there shocked. There were no warnings, no discussion, no effort to investigate. "I was under the camera the whole time," she said. "You can check." "We'll review the footage," he replied, already sounding like he had. "But for now your test is void, and you're suspended pending review." Aaliyah's breath caught in her chest. "Suspended?" Holt gave a thin smile. "It's standard policy." Aaliyah felt her world begin to crumble. That one word, suspended, meant more than just a few missed classes. It meant her scholarship might be revoked, her record tainted, her future dismantled, all over a piece of paper she had never touched. Holt handed her a written notice. "You'll need to call your guardian to pick you up." She took it, her hands trembling. Her throat burned with the threat of tears. But she refused to cry in front of him. "Can I at least finish the test?" she asked, desperate. "No," he said simply. "You've already compromised the integrity of the exam." She stood motionless for a moment, then slowly turned away and walked toward the front office. As she passed the classroom again, she didn't look in. She couldn't. Inside the room, the test continued like nothing had happened. But it wasn't the same. Whispers passed like wildfire, as the students tried to process what they'd just seen. In the back of the class, a boy named Jalen King sat frozen. A junior with a reputation for being quiet but observant. He hadn't said a word during the scene. But now his heart pounded in his chest. Because he saw it. 20 minutes before the test started, while most students were filing in, he saw someone bend near Aaliyah's desk. A white student, Marcus Gleason, had pretended to tie his shoe, but his hand had slipped under her desk. Jalen hadn't thought much of it then. But now? Now he wasn't so sure. He leaned toward the girl beside him, voice low. "I saw someone slip something under her desk before the test started," he whispered. She blinked, confused. "What?" But Jalen didn't repeat himself. His eyes were locked on the security camera, still quietly blinking red in the corner. Down the hall, Aaliyah sat in the front office, phone in hand, still in shock. She had just called her mother, barely able to explain through her broken voice what had happened. Her mother was on her way, furious. Aaliyah sat on the edge of the chair, clutching the suspension form. Her mind raced. None of this made sense. It wasn't just a mistake. It felt orchestrated. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Another anonymous account. No followers. No name. Check the camera. It wasn't you they were watching. She stared at it. Breath caught. In the reflection of the office window, Aaliyah caught sight of Marcus walking by, smirking. He wasn't headed to class. He was headed to Principal Holt's office, holding something in his hand. This wasn't the first time a black student had been humiliated by Principal Holt. Just the first time someone fought back. By the time Kendra Brooks stormed through the glass doors of Oak Ridge High, her daughter had already been sitting in the front office for over 30 minutes. Head down, hands clenched, humiliation eating her alive. Kendra didn't pause to speak to the secretary. Her eyes were locked on Principal Holt's door. She knew the man by reputation, had seen him shake hands at school functions, give polished speeches at assemblies, smile for photos in the school newsletter. But Kendra was from a different world. She had grown up in South Atlanta, where racism didn't wear suits and ties, and when her daughter's voice cracked over the phone, saying she'd been accused of cheating and suspended with no proof, something inside her snapped. She pushed the office door open without knocking. Holt looked up from his desk, unsurprised. That smile. Always that smile. "Mrs. Brooks," he said smoothly. "I assume you're here about—" "I'm here because you just accused my daughter of something she didn't do." embarrassed her in front of her classmates, and jeopardized her future, all without evidence. Kendra shot back, standing tall. I can assure you, we followed protocol. No, you followed your pattern. She cut in. You've had it out for her since sophomore year, and now that she's up for a full-ride scholarship, you're trying to destroy her. Holt didn't flinch. Ma'am, the integrity of our testing environment. Don't talk to me about integrity, Kendra said, voice shaking. Because what you did wasn't about the test. It was about power, and it was about race. Outside the office, Aaliyah could hear every word. Students passing by slowed, listening. Her embarrassment melted into something else, a sharp, simmering pride. Her mother wasn't just defending her. She was exposing him. After a tense meeting that resolved nothing, Kendra stormed out, vowing to speak with the school board. But the real shift came 2 days later, when the whispers started. A woman named Simone Turner called Kendra after hearing about Aaliyah's suspension. Her son Andre had been suspended the previous year, also during an AP exam, also for cheating. No evidence, no camera footage, just Principal Holt's word. Then came another call, then 3 more. Within a week, Kendra had compiled a list of 7 black students, all with the same story: sudden accusations, no concrete evidence, and automatic suspensions that stayed on their records. But here was the catch. Students from other racial backgrounds had cheated too. It was a high school after all. But those students, they were quietly counseled, given warnings, or allowed to retake tests. There were no formal punishments, no records, just clean slate. Kendra brought this information to the next PTA meeting. She wasn't subtle. She read every name aloud. She asked how many white students had been suspended in the last 5 years for academic dishonesty. The room was tense. People shifted in their chairs. No one had answers. But the moment that changed everything wasn't public. It happened in a grocery store parking lot. An older black woman approached Kendra while she was unloading bags. "You're Aaliyah's mama?" she asked, eyes cautious. Kendra nodded. "My grandson was in Holt's school 2 years ago," the woman whispered. "Smart, quiet. They kicked him out junior year for fighting, after a white boy called him the N-word. No one did a thing." Kendra felt like she was being handed puzzle pieces, piece after piece, and the image was becoming clearer. Principal Holt didn't just overreact. He targeted. At home, Aaliyah was spiraling. The scholarship committee had reached out to review the incident. Her file, once spotless, now had a red flag. Her test had been voided. The clock was ticking, and everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers, not because of what she did, but because of what someone else planted. She sat in her room, staring at the ceiling, her mind numb. Her phone buzzed with messages of support from friends, but they felt hollow. Her classmates were talking, speculating. Some believed her, others didn't, and Holt had said nothing publicly. No clarification, no defense, just silence. Then, on a rainy Friday afternoon, something unexpected happened. Kendra had returned to the school to drop off a written complaint at the main office. As she walked past the custodial hallway, a man in a blue maintenance uniform called out to her. "Miss Brooks," he said, glancing around before stepping closer. "I seen what happened." She turned, cautious. "I'm Mr. Calhoun. Been working here 15 years. I seen a lot." Kendra narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" He leaned in, voice low. "I clean the security rooms, sometimes. There's a closet upstairs, near the teacher's lounge. Most folks don't know about it, but that's where the backup camera footage gets stored. Old system, not synced with the main server. Holt's been deleting stuff from the main office, but he don't know about the backup." Kendra's heart skipped. "You're saying the test room footage still exists?" He nodded slowly. "I think it does, and you're gonna want to see it." Before she could respond, Mr. Calhoun glanced nervously over her shoulder and quickly walked away. Principal Holt had just entered the hallway, eyes fixed on them. When the story hit local news, the town picked sides, and the comments revealed their true faces. By Monday morning, the story had leaked. A local education blogger posted a piece titled, "Top Students Suspended Mid-Test. Parents Cry Foul Play at Oak Ridge High." Within hours, screenshots of the article flooded Facebook, TikTok, and community forums. The photo used was of Aaliyah at last year's science fair, standing beside her winning project, smiling. But now that image was being dissected, debated, and dragged into a vicious digital spotlight. Oak Ridge, a town that prided itself on unity, had never seen such public division. or such naked, blistering honesty about race. Comments poured in beneath every post. If she cheated, she cheated. Color doesn't matter. Rules are rules. Stop making everything about race. She's just mad she got caught. Funny how it's always a black kid crying racism when things don't go their way. I know this girl. She's never caused trouble. This is a setup. Principal Holt is just doing his job. He's one of the good ones. Wake up, Oak Ridge. This has happened before. Some comments were more vicious, filled with coded language, dog whistles, and barely veiled threats. Others were openly racist. But buried beneath the hate was a growing current of resistance. People asking questions, comparing stories, remembering what had been quietly swept under the rug. By midweek, the hashtags Dunn's Justice for Aaliyah and Oak Ridge Exposed began trending regionally. Videos surfaced, one from a student who had filmed Aaliyah being pulled from her seat, another from a parent describing how her son was suspended last year, under similar circumstances. The clips went viral. But while the digital world erupted, Oak Ridge's physical spaces split down the center. At Mount Zion Baptist Church, a vibrant black congregation tucked behind a faded brick facade, the energy was electric. Sunday service turned into a rallying cry. Elderly members hugged Kendra. Teens wore shirts that read, "We Believe Aaliyah." Choir songs doubled as protest anthems. Deacon Leonard Palmer took the pulpit and said what the newspapers wouldn't. They see a brilliant black girl, and they can't stand it. Because she doesn't bow. Because she won't break. And now they want to erase her. Cheers echoed through the sanctuary. But across town, the white-led Oak Ridge PTA board held an emergency meeting. After a brief internal vote, they released a carefully worded statement to the press. "We stand by Principal Holt's leadership and commitment to academic integrity. The suspension of Miss Brooks was conducted in accordance with Oak Ridge policy. We urge the community not to jump to conclusions or politicize this event." The message was clear. Holt wasn't just protected, he was being shielded. Inside the school, the atmosphere was tense. Students walked the halls in silence, unsure who stood where. Teachers avoided the topic, afraid to take sides. Some students who once called Aaliyah their friend now looked away when she passed. Others offered quiet support, a hand squeeze, a sticky note on her locker, a whispered "You got this." It wasn't enough. Aaliyah stayed home that week. The pressure was too much. Her name was everywhere, yet no one was listening to her. Reporters left voicemails. Scholarship committees sent, "We're reviewing" emails. Her reputation was under attack, and she had no way to fight back. Every time she looked at her reflection, she saw someone who had done everything right and still got dragged through the dirt. Her mother tried to stay strong, but the weight was unbearable. One night, Kendra sat across from Aaliyah, at their kitchen table, tears in her eyes. "I keep thinking, what if we had just moved to Atlanta? Would this still have happened?" Aaliyah didn't answer. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. Then came the letters. Anonymous mail started arriving at the Brooks home. Some supportive, others threatening. One typed note read, "Drop the case or things get ugly." Another, scribbled in messy handwriting, simply said, "Oak Ridge doesn't change." But not everything that came was dark. Late Thursday afternoon, as Aaliyah went to collect the mail, she noticed a small unmarked envelope wedged deep inside the box. It wasn't stamped. Someone had hand-delivered it. She opened it slowly. Inside was a black USB drive. No note, no explanation, except for a small sticky label attached to the plastic casing. "You were right, he set you up." Her breath hitched. She ran inside, heart pounding, yelling for her mother. Kendra took the drive carefully, inspecting it. "Don't plug it in yet," she said. "We need to do this smart." Aaliyah sat at the table, staring at the device, her mind racing. Who had sent it? What was on it? And why now? Before they could decide their next move, Kendra's phone buzzed, an unknown number, followed by a message. "If you watch that footage, you'll wish you hadn't." The footage showed something the school never expected anyone to see, and someone they couldn't explain. The USB drive sat untouched on the table for nearly an hour. Kendra paced the kitchen like a trapped animal, one eye on the clock, the other on the device. Aaliyah barely moved, her arms crossed tight across her chest, fingers digging into the sleeves of her hoodie. They'd been burned too many times to trust anything blindly now, especially not something as explosive as this. Finally, Kendra called her friend Marla Griffin, a cybersecurity analyst and single mom from their church. Marla had helped others uncover digital tampering and scams, and if anyone could make sure this drive wasn't a trap, it was her. 2 hours later, Marla sat at their dining table, laptop open, USB carefully plugged in. Her eyes scanned the screen, fingers tapping. "It's clean," she said after a minute. "No viruses, no spyware, just one video file. Large one. Security footage. Looks like a feed from inside a classroom." Aaliyah and Kendra leaned in. The screen came alive with grayscale footage. It was the AP testing room. Time stamped for the morning of the exam. Students milled about. Some found their seats. Others chatted quietly as the proctor arranged papers. Aaliyah hadn't entered yet. Marla fast-forwarded. At minute 0352, a figure moved. The camera, though slightly angled, caught it clearly. A student, tall, hoodie up, light skin tone, slipped past the front row, then paused. He bent low near the second desk from the left. The very seat Aaliyah would later occupy. He looked around once, then appeared to slide something under the desk. Then he stood and walked away quickly, exiting the frame just as Aaliyah entered moments later. Kendra gasped. "That's Marcus Gleason," Aaliyah said slowly, eyes narrowed. "Why would he?" The footage continued. Aaliyah sitting, focused, never looking down, never reaching under her desk, never cheating, not once. There it was. Cold, hard evidence. She had been framed. Kendra clutched the back of a chair, tears in her eyes. They lied, and they tried to destroy you." "I knew it," Aaliyah whispered. "But seeing it, it still hurts." They had their proof. But proof, they would learn, didn't mean justice. Not in Oak Ridge. The next morning, Kendra marched into the school board's administrative building, footage on a separate copy drive in hand. She requested an emergency meeting. 3 days later, she and Aaliyah sat in a sterile room beneath harsh fluorescent lights, facing 7 board members, all white, all stiff-faced. She plugged in the footage, played it from start to finish. When the shadowed figure bent beneath the desk, one board member coughed. Another shifted uncomfortably. Not a single one made eye contact with Aaliyah. When the video ended, silence lingered. Kendra leaned forward. "Well, are you going to do the right thing?" Chairman Walter Sims cleared his throat. "This footage raises questions. Yes. But we must be cautious. It may have been edited." "Edited?" Aaliyah said, voice sharp. "You think I made this up?" "We're not making accusations," Sims replied. "But given how sensitive the situation is, we'll need time to verify the source, validate the footage. Chain of custody is important." Kendra slammed her palm on the table.
"You're stalling."
Sims didn't flinch. "We're ensuring due process, Mrs. Brooks." "But you didn't need due process to suspend her," Kendra snapped. "You didn't need time when it was just Holt's word." Aaliyah sat still, watching them with eyes that no longer held disbelief, only clarity. She understood now. It was never about truth. It was about power, preservation, image. After the meeting, Kendra and Aaliyah walked out in silence. Just before they reached the doors, one of the board members, Mrs. Elena Forsyth, a younger woman, slipped out and caught up with them in the parking lot. "Wait," she said, glancing around. "I shouldn't be doing this, but I need you to see something." From her coat pocket, she pulled out her phone and showed Kendra a screen capture of a text message thread. At the top, Principal Holt. Below that, a message, dated the morning of the test. "I'm handling the Brooks girl today. She's gotten too confident. Time for a reset." Another message. "This better not blow up in our faces." And the reply, "Relax. No one checks the backup feeds." Kendra stared at it, heart pounding. "He planted the notes himself," Elena said quietly. "I warned him not to. But I was ignored. Again." Aaliyah's breath hitched. "You knew?" she asked. Elena nodded, shame washing over her face. "We've known for a while, but no one wanted to challenge him. He's protected. Has friends in the mayor's office, donors in the PTA. You cross him, your career ends." Kendra shook her head slowly. "So you all just stayed quiet?" "I wanted to help," Elena said. "But I needed something solid. This footage, it's a bombshell. You have to go public." Aaliyah looked at her, calm but fierce. "We will." That night, as the footage was being prepped to send to a civil rights attorney, Kendra received an email from an anonymous address, with a chilling subject line. "If you release that video, you'll never work in this town again." Whispers behind closed doors exposed a culture of silence that protected Holt for years. After the warning email, Kendra didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, staring at her inbox as if the threat would vanish on its own. Aaliyah curled on the couch, tried to sleep, but her mother's tension wrapped the whole house in a tight, breathless stillness. By morning, neither had spoken more than a few words. But fear wasn't new to either of them. What was new was fire. The footage had sparked something. First in Aaliyah, then in Kendra. Now it was creeping into the corners of Oak Ridge High, into teacher lounges and break rooms, into inboxes and quiet text threads, places where, for years, people had swallowed what they saw, turned their heads, protected their paychecks. And it started to spread. One of the first to break the silence was Mr. Raynard Wells, a 29-year-old black literature teacher, who'd only been at Oak Ridge High for 2 years. He was known for being sharp, quiet, and diplomatic, never controversial, never too loud, always careful, until now. Mr. Wells had seen too much to stay quiet. He remembered last fall when a black student, Danica Rowe, had been yanked from his class mid-period and sent home for attitude after simply asking why her grade had dropped. Holt didn't log it officially. The student's parents never received paperwork. The suspension, if it could be called that, existed only in the whisper. He remembered the detention logs. Holt kept in a locked drawer in his office, never digitally filed. He remembered how certain names kept showing up, over and over, and how most of them shared one thing in common. Now, standing in the church basement, where a small group of community organizers had gathered, Mr. Wells cleared his throat, clutching a thin binder of notes. "They made it clear to me," he said, voice low. "Speak out, and I'm gone. But I'm tired of protecting someone who doesn't protect these kids." Kendra nodded at him from across the room, tears in her eyes. She wasn't just grateful. She was furious. Furious that this young man had been forced to work in fear, that so many others still did. "What else have you seen?" she asked gently. Raynard looked down at his notes. Unrecorded detentions, black students sent to his office for minor infractions, dumb phones, talking back, but nothing ever put in the system. He'd call their parents directly. No paper trail. And the white students? He sighed. Warnings. Excuses. Boys will be boys. They didn't get sent anywhere. Others in the room shifted uncomfortably. A retired teacher named Mrs. Halley raised her hand. "He shut me down every time I brought it up," she said. "Said I was overreacting. Said I was seeing race where it didn't exist. I filed 3 written complaints. Nothing came of any of them." Kendra looked up. "You still have those complaints?" Mrs. Halley nodded slowly. "Copies. All of them." The binder passed around the room was small, but heavy with implication. Stories of isolation, of quiet discipline, of young black students being chipped away at one policy at a time. But what tied it all together wasn't just the racism. It was the silence. A whisper network, kept alive by fear, fear of retaliation, of demotion, of being labeled a troublemaker, in a town where your job could vanish overnight. Back at the school, Holt remained stone-faced. The board hadn't suspended him, not yet, and he walked the halls as if nothing had changed. Students stared. Some whispered. A few teachers avoided eye contact altogether. But the whisper network wasn't silent anymore. In the library, Ms. Dalka, a white teacher who'd once stayed quiet during a racially charged incident, quietly placed a printed screenshot on Aaliyah's desk as she studied alone. It was a staff email from a year ago. Holt had forwarded a list of students who were to be watched closely for classroom disruptions. Of the 10 names, 8 were black. The subject line read, "Student Behavior Forecast." No one had ever questioned it. Until now, the network grew. Former staff, old guidance counselors, even a few school nurses, came forward, each with stories, each with fragments. But the real shock came 2 days later. It was a cloudy Thursday afternoon, when Aaliyah and her mother were invited to meet with attorney Janelle Price, a civil rights lawyer from Atlanta, who had taken interest in the case. As they sat in the office lobby waiting, a young man entered through the back. Hoodie up, expression guarded. He looked about 22, thin frame, cautious eyes. He walked straight to Aaliyah. "You're her?" he asked. "The one they suspended?" Aaliyah nodded. He sat beside her slowly and pulled a yearbook from his bag. Oak Ridge High, 2018. Inside, a page was bookmarked. He turned it toward her. His name Terrence Miles. Senior, National Honor Society. College bound. He pointed at his own photo. "I was supposed to be valedictorian," he said. Top GPA, full ride to Morehouse. Holt said I plagiarized a speech for the graduation ceremony. Said someone had submitted the same thing the year before. My scholarship was pulled. Kendra leaned in, brows furrowed. What happened? He shrugged. I got angry. Almost sued. But then someone from the district approached me. Said if I kept quiet, they'd help me land on my feet. Next thing I knew, I had a job offer at the community center, with a signing bonus. Enough to shut me up. He opened the back of the yearbook. Tucked inside was a folded check stub and a typed letter. We appreciate your discretion regarding the recent misunderstanding. We hope this helps as you transition into the next chapter of your life. Signed, Office of the Superintendent. Aaliyah stared. Stunned. How many others? She whispered. Terrence looked away. More than you think. Before he could continue, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and stood up. Pale. I shouldn't have come, he said. They know I'm talking. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the yearbook on Aaliyah's lap. A janitor's forgotten closet held files that were never meant to be seen. The key wasn't labeled. Just a rusted, brass skeleton tucked inside an envelope that read only, Gym Storage.
Mr. Calhoun, the janitor who tipped off Kendra about the hidden footage, handed it to Mr. Raynard in the staff parking lot just after dusk. No words, just a glance, a nod, and the envelope, passed like contraband between allies. Mr. Raynard understood without asking. This was bigger than digital records, bigger than email leaks. This was something buried, on purpose.
The next evening, well after the final bell, Raynard returned to the school alone, hoodie up, nerves tight. Aaliyah and Kendra were waiting in a parked car nearby, their breath fogging up the windows, watching the rear entrance of the gym like it was the vault to a secret society. Mr. Calhoun met Raynard at the side door. No cameras pointed this way. Holt had made sure most hallways were covered, but not all. Some areas, especially older parts of the building, had been overlooked in the last renovation. Back here, Calhoun whispered, guiding him through a narrow hallway behind the gymnasium's equipment room. It's where the maintenance office used to be. No one checks it now. I clean near it every week. Never seen anyone go in. They reached a steel door, half covered in peeling paint and bolted shut with a padlock. Raynard inserted the key. Click. Inside, dust clung to every surface. Stale air hung like a warning. Old metal filing cabinets stood crooked in rows, some with drawers slightly open, others locked shut. Boxes stacked unevenly on top, leaned precariously, labeled only by year or department initials. Raynard stepped inside, heart pounding. What exactly is this place? He asked, voice low. Where old files go to be forgotten, Calhoun said grimly. Until now. The second cabinet from the left was labeled D Reports. Disciplinary. Raynard opened it slowly. Inside, stacks of manila folders. Some thick with documentation, others practically empty. He pulled a random one. Martinez. Joseph. 2019. Cheating allegation. He skimmed. Parent called to appeal. Suspension reversed. No strike on the record. Next Taylor. Elijah. 2020. Cell phone in class. Raynard read it twice. Suspended for 5 days. No parent signature. No appeal documentation. No review. He flipped through 10 more. The pattern hit him like a gut punch. Black students overwhelmingly suspended for first offenses. No evidence. No hearings. No records of parental involvement. Meanwhile, white students. Notations like warning issued, parent consulted, or verbal reprimand. He called Kendra immediately. You need to see this. 15 minutes later, she and Aaliyah were in the room, gloves on, masks up. Together they spread the folders across the dusty floor. Aaliyah's eyes scanned names she recognized. Friends, classmates, even kids she hadn't thought about in years.
They were keeping these from the system, Kendra whispered. These aren't in the digital logs. These are off-book.
Raynard moved toward a locked drawer marked 2021, current. He jimmied it open with a screwdriver. Inside, one folder caught his eye. Brooks. Aaliyah. He pulled it out, hands trembling. But it wasn't real. The document inside listed multiple infractions, talking back to staff, tardiness, disruptive behavior, all fabricated. Every event was backdated, signed with forged initials, some by teachers who had never taught her. There were even notes that claimed Aaliyah had been caught cheating in 2 previous exams, an outright lie. None of this ever happened, Aaliyah said, voice barely steady. Raynard nodded slowly. He's building a case, fabricating a history to make her look like a repeat offender. But why? Kendra asked. A moment later, Calhoun stepped forward, holding another file thicker, heavier. It wasn't alphabetized, just labeled in bold red marker, future threats, watch list. Raynard opened it carefully. Inside were profiles, student pictures clipped to reports, some typed, some handwritten. There were notes like likely to organize, influence over peers, and monitor for disruptive leadership behavior. Some were already familiar names. Black students, a few Latinx, one white student who had publicly criticized school policy on Twitter. Raynard flipped through the folder, page after page, until one name stopped them cold. Brooks, Aaliyah. Beneath it, highly intelligent, politically aware, dangerous if platformed, must be kept in check. Aaliyah stood frozen, as if the paper had burned her fingers. They saw me as a threat, she whispered. Not because of anything I did, but because of who I could be. Kendra's jaw clenched. This isn't just racism, she said, voice full of fire. This is institutional targeting. This is suppression. Raynard scanned the rest of the file, pages going back 5 years. Notes from staff, student screenshots, even meeting transcripts. It was a dossier, built like a criminal profile, but all the crimes were potential. They built a watch list, Raynard said softly. In a high school. Unexpected twist. Near the back of the threats folder, they found a small photo of Terrence Miles, the student who had shown them the yearbook just days earlier. His name was listed, but beneath it a note scribbled in ink. Mitigated. Resolved with financial support. Aaliyah's eyes went wide. They bought his silence. Raynard slowly closed the folder. The air heavier now. We need to get this to the attorney, he said. Everything. Tonight. But just as they began gathering the folders, a loud thud echoed from down the hallway. They froze. Another sound. Footsteps. Not janitor shoes. Heavy. Purposeful. Raynard flicked off the flashlight. Kendra grabbed Aaliyah's hand. They weren't supposed to be here. And someone knew. Outside the storage room, a door creaked open. A voice echoed down the hall. Calm, chilling, unmistakable. I warned you not to dig. What started as one suspension sparked a town-wide protest led by mothers, pastors, and kids in hoodies. The voice in the hallway had chilled the air in that hidden storage room. I warned you not to dig. But by the time Raynard peeked out, the corridor was empty. Whoever had spoken had disappeared, leaving only the echo of menace behind. That night, Kendra, Aaliyah, and Raynard smuggled out every file they could carry, storing them in 3 oversized duffel bags lined with school logos, and stuffed with the truth. By morning, fear had turned to fury. Kendra didn't wait for another threat or anonymous message. She acted. She had grown up in the shadows of civil rights marches, raised by a mother who'd survived the Atlanta student movement, and believed protest wasn't just a right, it was a legacy. The next day, Kendra stood on the sidewalk outside Oak Ridge High School, with a megaphone in one hand, and her daughter's forged disciplinary file in the other. She wore all black, her voice unwavering. This school tried to erase my daughter, she shouted. They called her a liar, a cheater, but what they really meant was, she was too smart, too bold, too black. By noon, 30 people had gathered. By sunset it was over 100. Parents who had once kept their heads down showed up holding hand-painted signs. Let her learn. Education, not execution. Our kids matter. Pastor Deacon Palmer from Mount Zion Baptist Church took the mic next. Oak Ridge High doesn't have a cheating problem, he said. It has a leadership problem and a truth problem. Beside him stood Miss Kimberly Reyes, a Latinx mother whose son had been suspended the previous year for excessive talking during an exam. No warnings, just gone. We were scared to speak, she said, eyes welling. But not anymore. Teenagers arrived in packs, many still in school uniforms. Some wore hoodies bearing hand-scrawled messages. The one that caught the most attention read simply, "Grades not graves." The chant took over by evening. Grades not graves. Grades not graves. That weekend, social media exploded. Footage of the protest went viral, thanks to a local college student who had live-streamed the entire event on TikTok and Instagram. Within hours, national accounts reposted it. Activists, celebrities, and educators across the country called attention to Oak Ridge High. The story hit national headlines on Sunday night. Georgia teen suspended over false cheating allegation. Racism at Oak Ridge High. By Monday morning, CNN and MSNBC were parked outside the school. Journalists hunted for interviews. Students were pulled from classes. PTA meetings were postponed. The town was no longer silent. It was split. At a gas station on the east side of town, an older white man muttered, "They always play the race card," under his breath, loud enough for the black cashier to hear. At the grocery store, two middle-aged women argued in front of the cereal aisle, one insisting Aaliyah deserved to be punished, the other defending her with trembling hands. At Mount Zion, prayers turned into planning. Community organizers arranged carpools, printed flyers, and launched a GoFundMe that reached $10,000 in a day. Proceeds would fund legal fees, therapy support for affected students, and a digital archive to preserve every document recovered from the storage closet. In downtown Oak Ridge, murals of Aaliyah's face began appearing. Anonymous artists painting her with a crown, surrounded by books, under the words "Unbreakable." But not everyone was celebrating. Inside the school board building, chaos reigned. Emails flooded in, from concerned parents, alumni, journalists, and attorneys. Donors threatened to pull funding. Local officials pressured the board to act. The temperature had shifted. Faced with mounting pressure, the board finally called an emergency meeting. It was scheduled for Friday evening, in the high school auditorium. The room, designed for 300, overflowed with almost double. People stood in the aisles. Some sat on the floor. Others gathered outside, watching through live streams projected on walls. Kendra spoke first. With her daughter seated behind her, she stood at the microphone and listed every false allegation Holt had made. Then she read from the future threats folder, every line, every label, every student's name who had been targeted. The crowd was silent except for gasps. Some in the audience cried. Next came Mr. Raynard Wells, who risked his career again to present copies of forged documents and accounts from staff members too afraid to testify. Then Terrence Miles returned, his voice shaking as he read aloud the payment letter he'd once accepted in silence. "I thought staying quiet would protect me, but it only helped them hurt the next one." Even some board members were visibly shaken. But Principal Holt, he remained unfazed. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped to the podium with the calm demeanor of a practiced politician. Dressed in his signature charcoal suit, he looked out over the crowd and gave a small, tight smile. "I appreciate the passion shared here tonight," he began. "I understand emotions are high, but we must remember, schools run on rules, procedures, and sometimes those procedures lead to difficult outcomes." He adjusted his tie. "But I want to be clear, no rules were broken. All decisions were made with fairness, integrity, and in the best interest of this institution, and I stand by every one of them." The room erupted, some in outrage, others in stunned silence. Holt didn't flinch. He stepped back from the mic, nodded to the board, and took his seat as if the past month had been nothing more than noise. Unexpected twist. As people shouted and chanted again, a hand shot up near the back of the auditorium. Elena Forsyth, the board member who had once leaked Holt's messages, stood holding something small and black between her fingers. It was a flash drive. "Madam Chair," she said, her voice clear, "before this meeting ends, the public has the right to view this footage, and the records Holt said didn't exist." She plugged it into the auditorium's AV system. The projector screen flickered to life. As the video began to play, the first image that appeared wasn't Aaliyah, but a secret recording of Holt, in his office, muttering to himself, "She had to go. She was becoming a symbol." The room erupted, and the screen faded to black. A single misforwarded email gave Aaliyah's legal team the weapon they needed. When the auditorium screen went black, it wasn't just the footage that left the town breathless. It was the realization that everything they'd suspected about Holt was not only true but methodical, calculated, cold. But the real nail in his carefully constructed facade was yet to come. Days after the emergency meeting, Aaliyah's attorney, Janelle Price, submitted an aggressive FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request to the district. The request was specific: internal emails from Principal Darren Holt and all Oak Ridge High administrative staff from the past 3 years regarding disciplinary action, grading policy, and valedictorian selection. It was a long shot. Districts were notorious for redacting everything, but Janelle had handled civil rights litigation before. She knew how to ask the right questions, and how to make herself legally terrifying. A week later, the district complied. What they sent looked harmless at first: a bloated byte-zip folder, with spreadsheets, scheduling forms, dry staff reminders about dress codes, and bell schedules. But buried deep inside, under a mislabeled subfolder, marked lunch schedule archives. Janelle's paralegal found it. An email chain that shouldn't have been there. A forwarded message that slipped through the district's redaction filters. From Holt to Vice Principal Sandra Keene, dated 3 weeks before Aaliyah's AP test. Subject line: Spring ranking situation. We need to be very strategic this semester. Some of these students are disrupting the academic balance. Let's revisit the AP rankings list and consider ways to ensure consistency in valedictorian optics. We can't afford another PR nightmare like Terrence. Further down the thread, Sandra replied, Copy that. I've already flagged a few outliers, the Brooks girl among them. Her scores are undeniable, but the tone she carries worries me. Could be another activist in the making. And then in the third message sent mistakenly to a retiring staff member who quietly forwarded it to Aaliyah's legal team, Holt wrote, This is the moment we set an example. No more last-minute underdog narratives, especially from that side of town. The phrase "that side of town" hung like a racial slur without ever needing to say the words. Janelle read it 3 times before forwarding it to Kendra. Then she called a press conference. By the next morning, news trucks were back on Oak Ridge's front lawn. I'm standing here today, Janelle said firmly into a row of microphones, because my client didn't just suffer an unfair academic punishment. She was targeted. Her future was discussed in closed-door emails by school officials who feared not her mistakes, but her excellence. She held up the printed emails, and when they couldn't discredit her with grades, they tried to manufacture character flaws, to label her disruptive, to call her potential dangerous. This wasn't policy enforcement. This was prejudice in a PowerPoint. The footage from the press conference went viral. Again, but the emails weren't done unraveling. A deeper review revealed something even more sinister. Communications between Holt and Rebecca Langford, the mother of a white student named Drew Langford, who was ranked just below Aaliyah in GPA. Rebecca wasn't just a parent. She was also a wealthy PTA donor and president of the local booster club. She had thrown fundraising galas, paid for 2 gym renovations, and frequently boasted about her deep ties to the district. In one flagged email, she wrote to Holt, We'd hate to see this school lose public support over something as small as a GPA dispute. I know you'll make the right decision. Our kids' reputations are on the line. Holt responded, Understood. We'll ensure the end-of-year announcement aligns with community expectations. The implications were devastating. Aaliyah wasn't just being kept from the valedictorian stage. She was being erased from contention entirely to protect institutional favoritism. By the end of the week, 3 more black students came forward with eerily similar stories, dropped from AP classes without notice, recommendations denied, GPAs quietly recalculated with rounding errors. One of them, a junior named Kamala Lewis, sobbed as she shared her transcript with Janelle. They told me my math grade was too low for honors, she whispered, but I had a 96. They changed it to an 89. Overnight, unexpected twist. Just as Janelle began preparing a civil rights lawsuit against the district, Aaliyah received a direct message on Signal, the encrypted messaging app she'd only recently downloaded. It came from an anonymous account. No name, just a symbol, a raised fist. The message read, We've been watching this for a long time. We have more. Way more. Full emails, surveillance archives, even private staff group chats. We'll send everything. But first, make sure you're ready. Aaliyah looked at her mom. Kendra stared back, eyes burning with rage and pride. Tell them we've been ready. A second message popped up on the screen. A list of files titled simply Oak Ridge Suppression 2017-2024.zip. And a note beneath it, Upload this, and the whole country will know. Hidden group chats between white parents revealed a sick plan: discredit, demoralize, and dominate. The file dump from the anonymous Signal user cracked open Oak Ridge like a dropped mirror. It wasn't just emails and surveillance archives. Nestled deep in the .zip folder was a separate subfolder, titled only Langford PTA Chat Export. At first, Janelle Price didn't understand what she was looking at. But as she read through the exported .xt files, line by line, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't official school communication. It wasn't administrative policy. It was a private WhatsApp group, an encrypted chat among several Oak Ridge PTA members, all white, many prominent, many parents of students in AP and honors classes. The group's name, Excellence First Coalition. At first glance, the messages seemed ordinary. Fundraiser updates, volunteer coordination, carpooling, But just 2 pages in, the tone shifted. A parent named Sharon Dunley, wife of a local real estate developer, typed, "If we let this trend continue, half the award ceremony will be East Side students. You've seen the rankings. It's turning into a takeover." Another responded, "We need to be more vocal. Academic spaces are being overrun with equity talk. The honors program is losing its rigor." A third chimed in, "It's not about grades anymore. It's about politics. That Brooks girl is just the start." Then came a chilling message from Rebecca Langford, the same woman who had exchanged emails with Holt. "We can't let them take over honors. This is our legacy. Time to protect what we built." Dozens of replies followed. "She's too loud, too visible. If she gets valedictorian, it'll be a national headline. Just watch. Maybe it's time to remind the school who funds their programs. Talk to Darren. He'll listen. Frame it as a discipline issue. That'll keep things quiet." A message from someone listed only as PTA Mom 3 struck like a blade. Let's not destroy her life. Just her momentum. People like her can't afford setbacks. The implications were sickening. These weren't just concerned parents. They were strategists, discussing the reputation of a teenage girl like she was a PR threat. And their language? It was deliberate, coded. But the meaning was unmistakable. Aaliyah was a symbol, and symbols had to be broken. The most haunting part wasn't just the cruelty. It was the coordination. The timing of the messages aligned perfectly with her suspension. The AP test incident happened 3 days after Rebecca Langford suggested making an example. One message, time-stamped the night before the test, read, "Tomorrow's a perfect opportunity. No cameras in the right spot. And she won't expect it." The room where Aaliyah, her mother and Janelle sat, went completely still. Aaliyah blinked hard. They planned it. Kendra said nothing. Her jaw was clenched so tight, her lip had started to bleed. Janelle clicked on the last page of the chat log. Among the dozens of heartless comments, one message stood out. It had been deleted in the live chat, but recovered in the export. It read, "Her scholarship's already gone. Next is her reputation." Unexpected twist. But then buried in a separate folder was a handwritten PDF scan. A letter. It was from a parent in the group. The writer didn't sign a name, but claimed they were racked with guilt. The letter detailed how they had joined the PTA chat just to stay informed, but had watched the tone turn increasingly dark, increasingly racist. The letter read, "I didn't know how to stop it. I should have spoken up. I should have warned you. I thought maybe if I stayed in the group I could slow things down. But I was wrong. They crossed the line, and now your daughter is paying the price." Attached to the letter were screen captures, time-stamped and geotagged, proving the source was internal. One image showed the exact moment the group decided to plant the note during the AP test. Another showed a direct message between Langford and Holt, with the words, "It's handled. She'll be out before anyone notices." Janelle stood pacing now, trembling with restrained rage. "This isn't just discrimination," she said. "It's conspiracy. It's targeting. And it's systemic." Kendra reached over, placing a hand on her daughter's back. Aaliyah was silent, eyes glossy, staring at her reflection in the darkened laptop screen. For a moment the room felt too small to hold the weight of what they had uncovered. They had always known racism lurked beneath Oak Ridge's charm. But this was orchestrated. Aaliyah finally whispered, "They wanted to erase me before I ever left this town." Janelle leaned forward. "But now we show them that you can't be erased." That night, as Janelle prepared the documents for federal submission, a notification flashed across her encrypted drive. "You're being watched. Stop this, or we'll go after your license next." With national eyes on Oak Ridge, Aaliyah filed a lawsuit that would make civil rights history. The walls of Janelle Price's law office buzzed with energy. Her team moved like clockwork, printing, scanning, highlighting, organizing the growing stack of evidence into what they now called the Oak Ridge files. Every folder was color-coded. Every file was backed up twice. They knew what they were holding wasn't just a case, it was a reckoning. When Janelle stepped to the podium on the courthouse steps, an Atlanta national press already lined the sidewalk. Flashbulbs popped. Boom mics rose. Behind her stood Kendra and Aaliyah, side by side, their silhouettes steady and unflinching. To the left stood 13 other black students, former and current, whose stories echoed Aaliyah's in different tones but identical rhythms. The youngest was 14, the oldest 20. All had been targeted. All were ready to speak. "My name is Janelle Price," she said into the sea of cameras, her voice slow and grounded. and I am representing Aaliyah Brooks and 13 other students in a civil suit against the Oak Ridge School District, Principal Darren Holt, and members of the PTA, who coordinated the unlawful targeting, academic suppression, and reputational sabotage of black students under their care. Gasps followed, but Janelle didn't flinch. What happened to Aaliyah wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a systemic plan, a racial filter masked as policy, a conspiracy carried out in group chats and hallway whispers, with the aim of preserving whiteness at the expense of justice. Reporters shouted questions. None were answered. Janelle held up a thick, sealed packet, the class action lawsuit, officially filed. The press exploded. The Washington Post ran the headline, "Student versus System, Georgia Teen Takes on High School Racism." CNN aired a live interview with Kendra, who stared straight into the lens and said, "You can't keep taking our kids' futures and calling it discipline." Meanwhile, talk shows debated whether academic equity was going too far. Conservative outlets framed Aaliyah as a pawn, but the evidence was too loud to ignore. Screenshots, emails, forged files, group chats, surveillance. It was overwhelming. Oak Ridge found itself under siege, not from violence, but from accountability. Superintendent Marla Givens attempted damage control, calling the lawsuit a distraction and a misrepresentation of district values. But her press statements fell flat. Public trust had eroded. Then came the formal hearings. In a courtroom packed with reporters, supporters, and school officials, the first round of legal proceedings began. The goal determined whether the suit had enough grounds for a federal trial. Aaliyah sat in the front row, hands clenched in her lap, her nerves a quiet storm. Behind her, the other students exchanged silent glances, survivors of a machine that had once written them off as problems to be managed. Holt was subpoenaed to appear, and he did, but he refused to testify. Flanked by a trio of stone-faced attorneys, he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights over and over. His voice robotic, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. The once smug principal now looked like a man standing at the edge of a crumbling empire. Still, his silence became a headline. Principal Holt pleads the fifth in racial discrimination case. 13 students, 1 system, 0 answers. The courtroom was silent as Janelle read aloud portions of the PTA group chat. She walked through the manipulation of GPAs, the erased appeals, the watch list. With each revelation, the room grew heavier. Some members of the jury shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, visibly disturbed. But the breakthrough came late one afternoon, when the judge reviewed the motions submitted by Janelle's team. She requested that the security footage from the AP test, the forged files found in the hidden closet, and the full WhatsApp group chat export be admitted as evidence. The school district's lawyers objected, claimed privacy violations, questionable sourcing, and chain of custody concerns. But Judge Malcolm Wright, a seasoned black jurist known for his no-nonsense courtroom, raised his hand before they could finish. He turned to Janelle. "You're confident in the authenticity of these materials?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," she replied firmly. "They've been vetted, mirrored, and confirmed by multiple sources. What's at stake here is not only these students' futures, but the ethical foundation of the school system itself." He nodded, then turned to the district's lawyers. "And you've had ample time to review them." "We have," one lawyer mumbled. Judge Wright paused, folded his hands, and leaned slightly forward. "Then the court will allow it. All of it. The footage, the files, the messages. It's time this community sees what's been done in its name." Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Unexpected twist. And then, just as court adjourned for the day, a clerk handed Judge Wright a last-minute envelope. He opened it slowly, read the contents, then passed it to the bailiff without a word. Kendra watched his expression shift, not anger, but gravity. "What was that?" she whispered to Janelle. Janelle's eyes narrowed. "I don't know yet." Outside the courtroom, a reporter received an anonymous tip. Someone from the state education department is about to testify, and what they're going to say will bring the whole district down. In a silent courtroom, the truth played out on screen, and jaws dropped. The hum of the projector was the only sound in the courtroom. Every seat was filled. Media lined the back wall. Local students filled the gallery, and at the center sat the 12 jurors. Their faces were composed, but the tension in their shoulders betrayed the weight they were carrying. This wasn't just a trial. It had become a mirror for the town. Janelle Price stood beside the large screen. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her fingers moved across the laptop's touchpad, and the screen lit up with the first piece of visual evidence, the surveillance footage from the AP testing room. Grainy at first. Silent. The timestamp flickered in the corner, 7:59 a.m. Students filed into the room. Quiet chatter. Teachers setting up. Then, the camera caught it. A figure bending near Aaliyah's desk. Hood up. Quick movements. The room hadn't filled yet. The person slid something beneath the desk and walked away, blending back into the flow of students. Seconds later, Aaliyah entered. The room was still. No one blinked. The footage continued, showing Aaliyah seated, eyes on her paper, never once looking beneath the desk. Not even once. Her movements were methodical, focused. The definition of integrity. When Principal Holt stormed in and removed her from the classroom on screen, an audible gasp echoed from the jury box. One juror, a woman in her 60s, pressed a tissue to her lips. Her shoulders trembled. Then came the backup hallway footage. The hidden camera angle Mr. Calhoun had helped uncover. It showed Marcus Gleason slipping a folded paper into his hoodie pocket as he walked away from Holt's office. A timestamp revealed it occurred just 15 minutes after Aaliyah's removal. Janelle paused the video, then switched to the watchlist files. Page after page displayed on screen for the jury. Names of black students marked with coded labels: disruptive potential, monitor for influence, at risk of organizing. None of these students had disciplinary records. None had been informed. More gasps. More silence. Janelle took a breath, then called her first final day witness, Mr. Raynard Wells. He stepped forward, voice even, hands folded in front of him. His testimony didn't shout. It didn't accuse. It cut slowly, precisely, as he described witnessing the quiet erasure of his students. I once had a student write a flawless essay on Baldwin. He said, scored it myself. Holt had it regraded by someone else. Dropped it from an A to a B-. When I asked why, he told me, we don't want to encourage aggression masked as intellect. A collective shift in the room. The racism wasn't loud in Oak Ridge. It was measured. Then came Elena Forsyth, the school board member who had leaked Holt's messages. She took the stand, tears in her eyes. I sat in meetings where we were told to redirect the narrative. I watched a bright young woman's reputation get destroyed because adults were more interested in protecting their own image than telling the truth. She paused, her voice cracking. I failed her. The defense, tight-lipped and desperate, objected twice, both overruled. They had no witnesses, no statements, just denials and procedural deflections. And finally, it was time. Closing arguments. Janelle stood in the center of the courtroom, her hands clasped, her tone low. We have shown you documents, footage, testimonies, all pointing to one truth. This wasn't about cheating. This wasn't about discipline. This was about fear. Fear of a young black woman being too brilliant. Fear that she might inspire others. Fear that she would break the mold. She moved closer to the jury. Aaliyah Brooks was not suspended for breaking the rules. She was suspended because she refused to be quiet, because she believed in herself, and they saw that as a threat. She turned toward Holt, still seated, stone-faced. What does it say about us as a town, as a country, when excellence isn't protected, but punished? When the system doesn't just fail our children but builds machinery to suppress them? Silence. Then she walked to Aaliyah's table, placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and looked back at the jury. Don't just see the evidence, feel what it cost her. Then she sat. The defense said little. A dry summary of policies, vague definitions, no denial, just strategic ambiguity. The jury didn't seem moved. As the judge instructed them and dismissed the court for deliberation, all eyes followed the 12 as they filed out. Some glanced back at Aaliyah, some did. But one juror, a man in his 40s wearing a navy blazer, lingered. He didn't move immediately with the others. He looked straight at Aaliyah, then to Holt, and for a moment, his lips parted like he was going to speak. But he didn't. Outside the jury room, while the press waited and tension filled the air, a quiet alert pinged on Janelle's phone. A message from an unknown number. There's one more file. One you haven't seen. If this goes public, it'll bury everything. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom and changed Oak Ridge forever. Rain had started to fall lightly by the time the jury returned. The courtroom was silent, except for the shuffle of feet as the 12 jurors filed in, their expressions guarded, solemn. Aaliyah sat perfectly still, her fingers wrapped tightly around the armrest of her chair, her mother beside her, eyes closed in silent prayer. Janelle stood motionless at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, lips pressed into a thin, determined line. Across the aisle, Principal Holt remained statuesque, unmoved. He wore the same charcoal suit, the same slicked-back hair, but something about his presence had shifted. It was the air around him, no longer commanding, no longer confident. It was the silence of a man who knew his time was running out. Judge Malcolm Wright took his seat at the bench, the wooden gavel resting loosely in his right hand. The air was thick, and every breath felt like it would crack the quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, his voice deep and unwavering, "have you reached a verdict?" The forewoman, a petite woman with silver hair and steady eyes, "We have, Your Honor." She handed a sealed envelope to the bailiff. He crossed the room, his footsteps sharp against the marble floor, and passed it to the judge. He opened it slowly, scanned the page, then looked up. The weight of decades pressed against the next few seconds. In the matter of Aaliyah Brooks et al. Versus Oak Ridge Unified School District, Principal Darren Holt, and associated parties, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. A soft gasp rose from the crowd. But the judge wasn't done. "We, the jury, find that the defendants engaged in discriminatory practices, intentional emotional harm, reputational defamation, and willful negligence in the handling of academic records, student discipline, and equal opportunity enforcement." Another beat passed before the sound truly registered. Aaliyah blinked. Her grip loosened. Kendra's hand found hers, and squeezed, a single tear sliding down her cheek. The dam hadn't burst, not yet, but it cracked, letting the weight escape in slow motion. Janelle exhaled, not in victory, but in relief. Judge Wright continued. Per the jury's recommendation, and under state and federal education statutes, Principal Darren Holt's administrative license is hereby suspended, pending permanent revocation upon state board review. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Reporters scrambled to type. And due to systemic negligence, failure to protect students from targeted academic suppression, and intentional erasure of appeals procedures, the judge added, turning to the school district's legal counsel, the Oak Ridge School Board will be subject to civil liability proceedings and may face state-level sanctions pending further review. On the other side of the courtroom, Holt didn't blink. But inside, something cracked. Because in that moment, with his empire unraveling, he realized something. They believed her.
They all believed her.
As the gavel struck the block, a ripple of emotion burst from the gallery. Quiet sobs, whispered prayers, a stifled yes from a former student in the back. Cameras clicked. Reporters rushed for quotes. But Aaliyah remained seated, still frozen, still staring ahead. "I don't know what to feel," she finally whispered. "You don't have to feel it all today," Kendra said softly. "You just need to know you made history." But history didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like trembling shoulders, like exhaustion so deep, it curled beneath the skin. Later that afternoon, the court steps were crowded with voices. Chants of "We see you, Aaliyah," and "Say her name." But Aaliyah didn't address the press. She didn't speak to the cameras. She just held her mother's hand, walked down the steps, and let herself disappear into the car. The city was still buzzing when they arrived home. Banners lined the fences on their street. Neighbors stood outside, clapping quietly as they pulled into the driveway. On the front porch sat a bouquet of white roses. No note, just the weight of quiet solidarity. Inside, the living room lights were dim. Aaliyah sat down on the edge of the couch, her legs bouncing lightly, nerves still firing in silent aftershocks. She reached for her laptop, opened her email. There it was, bolded, unread, and waiting. Subject: Columbia Admissions Office. Final decision on scholarship status. Her hand hovered over the trackpad. She didn't click it. Not yet. Because what if it wasn't good news? What if everything she'd endured, everything she'd fought for, was still not enough? What if they still say no? She asked, barely above a whisper. Kendra sat beside her. And what if they say yes? She replied gently. You didn't fight just for the scholarship, baby. You fought to prove you deserved to even try. Aaliyah nodded slowly, her breath catching. Still, her hand didn't move. Unexpected twist. Across town, in the shadows of a quiet office, someone else opened their inbox. The interim superintendent of Oak Ridge. Inside was a flagged message, marked urgent. Subject: internal audit request, files missing from district server. Suspected inside deletion. Investigation pending. Someone had tried to erase the digital trail. But they were too late. Aaliyah finally moved her cursor, hovered over the email, and just as she clicked to open it, a new notification popped up above it. Congratulations, Miss Brooks. You've been selected to speak at the National Student Equity Summit. She lost her dignity, her peace, and nearly her future, but Aaliyah never lost her power. The email from Columbia sat open on her screen, the words glowing like a soft balm over months of raw wounds. We are pleased to reinstate your full scholarship to Columbia University. Effective immediately. We deeply regret the delays caused by pending investigations and commend your courage during this time. No exclamation marks. No fireworks. But it was everything. Aaliyah read it 3 times. Slowly. Carefully. Her hands didn't shake this time. They were steady, like her voice when she whispered, "I got it back." Kendra reached across the table and pulled her daughter into the kind of hug that dissolves noise. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no fear of what would happen next. Just the quiet return of something Aaliyah had thought she'd lost, her future. And Columbia wasn't alone. Within a week, offers poured in from universities across the country. Stanford, Howard, NYU, Georgetown. Letters filled with admiration, not just for her academic record, but for her resilience, her voice, her fight. Schools weren't just offering scholarships now. They were offering platforms. The irony wasn't lost on her. Months ago, she was a statistic, one that Oak Ridge High had tried to erase. Now she was a symbol, a headline, a beacon of hope for every article that used her name. And yet, despite the invitations, the speaking gigs, the eager emails from talk shows and major publications, Aaliyah declined them all. Every single. Because being exploited by the system once had taught her something valuable. She would control her own narrative from now on. "I'm not a story for their ratings," she told Janelle during a call. "I'm not a mascot for resilience. I'm a person who survived something ugly, and I'm still figuring out what healing looks like." Janelle respected it. "Then you take your time," she replied. "The world will still be watching, but they'll wait on your terms." Aaliyah chose peace. She went back to journaling, walking at dawn, volunteering at the community center on weekends, without cameras. She reconnected with friends who'd stood by her, and forgave silently those who hadn't known how to. But the most defining moment came not from the media or the courtroom, or the universities, but from her living room. It was late. Kendra was folding laundry, and Aaliyah sat on the couch with a cup of tea. The TV was off. The house was quiet. "You knew before anyone," Aaliyah said suddenly, her voice soft. Kendra looked up, curious. "Knew what?" "That I didn't cheat. That something was wrong. You didn't even hesitate." Her mother paused, then smiled faintly. "That's what mamas do." "No," Aaliyah said, shaking her head. "You didn't just defend me. You believed me. When even I started to doubt myself, you didn't." Kendra folded a shirt and set it down slowly. "Because I know who I raised," she said. "And they may try to take your name, your peace, your pride, but they can't rewrite who you are. Not as long as I'm breathing." Aaliyah nodded, tears pooling, not from pain this time, but from the fragile beauty of being seen, being held, being known. Later that week, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single envelope, handwritten, thick paper, no signature, just a familiar emblem embossed in the corner, the Oak Ridge School Board. Aaliyah opened it carefully. "I didn't stop him. I should have. I saw what he was doing. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job. My standing, my silence hurt you, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life." The next paragraph was shakier. "You deserved better. Not just from him, from all of us who watched and said nothing. I hope this apology, however late, finds you stronger than the storm we helped create." A single sentence was underlined at the bottom. "You didn't just win, you revealed us." There was no name, but the envelope had been postmarked from a location tied to Sandra Keene, Holt's former vice principal, the same woman who had quietly stepped down after the trial began. She hadn't spoken publicly, hadn't testified. But now, this. Aaliyah turned the letter over, and tucked inside the fold was a tiny USB. A note attached read, "This one never made it to the trial. It's older, but it proves he's done this before." The girl they tried to erase now leads a movement to protect students across the country. The USB drive tucked into the apology letter was over 4 years old. Inside, buried in archived staff video folders, was footage from a disciplinary meeting that had never been documented officially. A young black student, sophomore, sharp-eyed, confident, sat across from Principal Holt. Her offense? Disrespectful tone during a group project presentation. The video showed her asking a simple question. Why was my grade lower than my partner's when we did the same work? Holt's response was calm but laced with icy condescension. We reward character as much as intelligence here. The clip cut before the girl walked out, her shoulders still square but her future already being rewritten. The student's name? Tasha Morgan, a straight-A student who disappeared from Oak Ridge High mid-semester that year. Her name had never come up in the trial, but the footage confirmed what Aaliyah had feared all along. This wasn't about her. It never had been. She was just the latest. And now, she'd be the last. Months later, Aaliyah Brooks stood behind a podium, not in a courtroom, but in front of hundreds at a conference in Washington, D.C., unveiling the launch of her nonprofit, Tested and True. What began as a whisper between survivors had grown into a national campaign. Its mission was twofold: surveillance accountability in public schools, ensuring cameras weren't used to target students, but to protect them; anti-racist education reform policy checks, unbiased academic ranking systems, and mandatory racial equity training for all administrators. In less than 6 months, the organization had reached 12 school districts across 5 states. Aaliyah had partnered with legal watchdogs, educational justice groups, and technology firms working on ethical AI monitoring tools for schools. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was trying to make sure no other student ever felt the world crumble for simply being seen. Districts began reaching out. Some asked for guidance. Others wanted her to train their staff directly. A few quietly apologized for staying silent during her trial, asking for a chance to do better. Her name was now more than a hashtag. It was legislation in the making. The media caught on quickly. Headlines like "From Cheating Accusation to Changemaker, Aaliyah Brooks Builds National Movement" dominated the internet again. Newspapers who once reported on her case with caution now called her a voice the education system can't ignore. But for every article, Aaliyah stayed grounded. She still refused late-night talk shows. She turned down the documentary deals. And when a streaming platform offered her a dramatized miniseries of her life, she smiled politely and said, "I'm not a character, I'm a catalyst." 1 year later to the day, the anniversary of her suspension, Oak Ridge buzzed for a different reason. The high school had invited her to speak at graduation. An olive branch, a PR move, or an overdue apology. It didn't matter. Aaliyah said yes. Because it wasn't about the school anymore. It was about the students, the ones who came after her, who needed to see that dignity doesn't have to wait on permission. The auditorium had changed. A new principal now, black, young, and intentional. New policies, new faces, but the memory still lived in the cracks of the tiled floor. As she stepped onto the stage in a navy blue dress, applause swelled. Some stood, some wept. Aaliyah didn't look at the board members in the front row. She looked at the students in caps and gowns, and smiled. She began. "I once sat where you are sitting now, full of ideas, full of hope, and then full of fear. I was told I didn't belong, that I was a problem to be corrected. That speaking out made me disruptive. But you know what I learned? Disruption is how justice begins." She paused. The crowd silent. "You don't need permission to be worthy. You don't need validation to take up space. And if anyone ever tries to define your future by your silence, raise your voice." Her speech ended in a standing ovation. Outside, as the sun dipped below the Oak Ridge skyline, students surrounded her with questions, hugs, and thank yous. Some told her they'd followed her story every step of the way. One boy, tears brimming, said, "You gave me the words to believe I'm not a mistake." She hugged him tightly. "You were never the mistake," she whispered. "You were the threat they didn't see coming." Unexpected twist. As she walked to her car, a woman in a long beige coat approached from across the parking lot. She looked older, tired, but determined. "I almost didn't come," she said. Aaliyah recognized her instantly. Sandra Keene. "I wrote the letter," she admitted. "The one with the USB. It took me too long to speak up." Aaliyah studied her. Quiet. Measuring. "I know what I did," Sandra continued. "And what I didn't do. I won't ask for forgiveness. But I wanted you to know. I left Oak Ridge. I'm working in a district where we're doing it right. Where we're trying." She handed Aaliyah a folder. Inside, a proposal. A plan to implement tested and true training across 6 new schools. I thought you might want to lead it. Aaliyah closed the folder, nodded once, and extended her hand. I'm not here to erase the past, she said, but I'm here to make sure it never repeats. That night, back in her apartment, Aaliyah checked her voicemail. One message stood out, a soft voice saying, "You don't know me, but I was on the watch list too, and I think it's time we tell all their names. If this story shook something in you, don't let it stop here. Ask what's happening in your own schools, your own towns, behind the polished doors. Speak up when silence is expected, and stand up when someone's future is on the line." Change